So Deborah Silverman says, it's safe finally for me to be in my body now. I'm right on schedule. I don't need to try so hard. My soul promised to wake up inside of the dream. In Bereshis 47:13-27, which is Genesis, and this is from the Art Scroll Chumash, the Stone Edition. Joseph's agrarian policy enriches Paro. Yosef is one of the 12 tribes. At the beginning of first he was one of the 12 brothers. At the beginning of the famine, Joseph uses his immense economic power to accumulate nearly all the wealth and all the land of Egypt for Paro. Since only Joseph had preserved food in sufficient quantities to feed the masses and he had Paro's full backing, the population had no choice but to accede to his every demand. Rabbi Monk cites historical descriptions of similar famines in Egypt during which people practiced cannibalism, and the route from Syria to Egypt resembled a vast field strewn with corpses. Bereshis chapter 50 verses 15-21. Joseph reassures his brothers he won't get revenge on them after their father dies for selling him as a slave and then him going to Egypt. Rabbi Hirsch notes that without parents as a focal point of the family, it's unfortunately natural for siblings to meet less often and even drift apart. That happened after Jacob died, but the brothers interpreted it as pretending to something sinister. In Yevamos 65b on lies, it says it's permitted to deviate from the truth in a manner where the peace is threatened. For example, Sarah laughs when she hears that she'll have a baby, and she says, but my husband's old. But Hashem actually tells Avram that she really calls herself old. And number two, Joseph, his brother said to Jacob, told them to tell Joseph to forgive them after Jacob died, but really it's not the truth, it's just because they thought it would preserve the peace. Moment. In the Jewish Home, which is compiled by Rabbi Yosef Karasek on Chabad, Jewish teachings, it says that the man brings wheat in the home, the wife grinds it and bakes it. That's from Yevamos 62b. All the sins of the bride and groom are forgiven on their wedding day. Yerushalmi Bikurim 3:3, quoted by Rashi about Bereshis, Genesis 36:3. He created them, male and female, and he blessed them. This is from Bereshis, Genesis 1:28, which shows that Hashem didn't, when he was alone, Hashem, with Adam, it was only after he additionally created Chava, then he blessed them. He didn't bless them before that. Continuing from this book called The Jewish Home, when husband and wife merit, the divine presence resides in their midst. Sota 17a. Therefore, and I'm giving all the sources. Therefore, a man shall leave his fathers and his mothers and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Bereshis 2:24, Genesis. And I want to say my birthday is 2/24, February 24, my second birthday. Rashi, who's a commentator, writes about the words are one flesh, that the child is created through the two of them. It says, though their flesh becomes one. In Moed Katan 18b, a person should act with haste and alacrity, because perhaps someone else will precede him through his prayers of mercy. One other who will be able to marry the particular woman who is not the other guy's half of his soul, because the prayer for his wife, his prayers are for her, and so he gets her, while the man who possesses the second half of that woman's soul loses his true mate. So if they share one soul, how can someone take someone else's match? How can people get divorced if they're married? Sefer Chassidus, section 383, says some marriages are not one soul and two people, but a body collection. And a marriage that lacks a body connection, and a marriage that lacks the soul connection can be a divine decree, too, iniquity in one of them, which is why someone else can marry the true match of someone else. And three, the result of one's prayers, etc. And this kind of marriage only lasts a limited time before it dissolves and they're divorced, and only then is it possible for them to marry their true soulmate. In Kedushin 2b, it says one should energetically seek his mate with haste, because it says it's an analogy to a person who has a lost object. Sefer Chassidim, sections 135 and 243, says each and every person should pray to God that he finds his true, correct match. And I had a conversation with a woman named Esti Picado. She was saying that sometimes, she said she feels like there's no place you could really take up safely, and sometimes it feels like there's no place a human can be without affecting the people around them. So I said, we could wish each other healing and guidance, and ultimately to not only feel in body and in aura, but to be a part of creating a safe space for all in the world. It's a balance of being affected and affecting. Sometimes it's about our early life's formed predisposition, whether we are allowed to move the space around us, or only be seen and not heard, or to have a seat at the table, or whether we were adultified and had to be a partner to the parents and care about their needs and be responsible for them, and or if we were guilted for wanting attention. For example, sometimes I was not given enough stimulation and interaction, so I gave her some recommendations. I said, we could do hispodidus, which is like where you go inward and do like an accounting. You can do peace and quiet, nature time, practicing self-inquiry, journaling, and more rest, even if you're not sleeping. Then I want to read some literature. So from the SLA group, which is Sex and Love Addicts 12-step program, the literature on the 6 steps. So as we continue to live with ourselves, however, we found the consequences of indulging in our character defects increasingly uncomfortable to endure. Anger could seize us unexpectedly and fill us with murderous rage, or emotional binges would leave us despairing and suicidal, or depression would sap our will to go on, our hope for any future at all. We began to see the fallacy of that logic, which said we could be guilt-free since everything we'd done was caused by addiction. We saw the spiritual bankruptcy behind the cosmetic humility of not wanting to be perfect. It became apparent that it would not work for us to specify just exactly what God could and could not do to us, with us. Our attitude towards defects and underlying problems began to change. With new eyes, we could see the serious consequences in the lives of others when they couldn't voluntarily surrender these difficulties. With growing maturity, we realized healthy relationships could only exist if we were human rather than superhuman. We came to understand that addiction appears to be a disease of actions when viewed from without, but it's really a perversion of moral and ethical values as experienced from within. The spiritual dimensions of our disease were now clear. We were now moved from a limited surrender of a specific addiction. I want to say, because women go through, I want to just say that I learned this on TikTok. Someone posted it, Vampire Van or something, is shared by a woman. That's her TikTok name. I don't know. I don't have TikTok. Someone else posted. She said, because women go through menopause, that means that the biological function to pass on knowledge, that's what it is. So that it means we're not just here to procreate. Women are not just here for babies. Actually, it's men who make sperm till they die. So women's value is not in reproductive systems, but in the passed on information that is imperative for the survival of the species. And then I read something interesting online, the 12 female archetypes. I don't know where it's from. And it said Queen, which is 15% empathy, 3% skills, 42% independence, 37% wisdom, and 10% creativity. Mother, 1% empathy, 10% skills, 4% independence, 27% wisdom, and 3% creativity. I don't know if these add up. I'm just reading it. And I don't know if that was really one. Maybe really 1%? That doesn't seem to add up to 100%. Mystic, 2%. Empathy, 15% skills, 24% independence, 18% wisdom, and 20% creativity. Maiden is 49% empathy, skills is 15%, independence 8%, wisdom 4%, and creativity 19%. Maybe mother has to have her empathy for her children. She stops being empathetic for everyone else. Okay, lover, 12% empathy. Did I just say that? No, I hope not. Okay, 12% empathy, skills 5%, independence 38%, wisdom 32%, creativity 1%. Creator 20%, skills 10%, 12% independence, wisdom 50%, and creativity 2%. A sage is 6% empathy, skills 11%, independence 54%, 10% wisdom, and 11% creativity. Healer is 3% empathy, 10% skills, independence is 11%, wisdom 15%, creativity 40%. Huntress is 12% empathy, 5% skills, independence 33%, wisdom 39%, creativity 2%. Dame, 23% empathy, skills 8%, independence 59%, wisdom 12%, creativity 22%. Heroine, 8% empathy, skills 13%, independence 11%, wisdom 10%, and creativity 62%. And caregiver, 45% empathy, 8% skills, independence is 59%, 12% wisdom, creativity 4%. I just feel like that's a really someone's, I don't know their measures, I don't know where they got it from, but it was just interesting to think about that. And by no means am I saying it's convinced me that that's exact measurements. I just think that everything happens to be shared for a reason. So hopefully that was the right numbers for the right things. I mean, the mother one didn't seem to add up. I either made a mistake or they made a mistake. All right, that's all for now. Okay, bye.